All the external messages of the segregated South told me as a black child I wasn't worth much. But I didn't believe it because my mother and father always made me believe that I could be anything. But I went into court where all the lawyers were sitting, all white male lawyers, and it was as if a Martian had walked in the house. And I tried to shake hands with every one of them. None of them would shake my hand, but that was all right. Mississippi was just the place that was suited for what I wanted to do. People were sharecropping. They didn't have enough to eat. They lived in shacks. They had no rights, and fear was palpable. The chief national security issue facing this country is the failure of this nation to invest in its children, where you've got a majority of all of our children who can't read and write and compute at grade level. Who's going to be our workforce? And this is what's going to topple us as a nation. It's our moral Achilles heel. It's our economic Achilles heel. And I am more mission-driven than I have ever been to say, wake up, country. We can't go backward. And one of the lessons of my childhood was that you're a child of God. You could look down on nobody, and nobody can look down on you.
Please welcome this civil rights icon, Marian Wright Edelman.
With your energy, we're going to transform America and make it understand that God did not make two classes of children. All children are sacred. When I was growing up in my little hometown, rural, segregated Bennettsville, South Carolina, the outside South Carolina here in the house, the outside world told me I wasn't worth very much, but I didn't believe it because my parents said it wasn't so, my teachers said it wasn't so, my preachers, my daddy, the preacher, said it wasn't so, and so I knew it wasn't so. And so two big lessons which you just reflect tonight came back to me as I sat there listening to all the energy in the room, is that God runs a full employment economy, and that if you just follow the need, you'll never lack for a good purpose in life. And second, that service is the rent each of us pays for living. And so I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the rent you have paid this week in reaching out to your brothers and sisters, many of whom have been left behind. Bless you, and keep doing it when you go back home so that we can really begin to create a level playing field for every child. On the day he was assassinated, Dr. King called his mother to give her the title to his next Sunday sermon. And it was Why America May Go to Hell. And he says America's gonna go to hell if we don't use her vast resources to end poverty and make it possible for all of God's children to have the basic necessities of life. And he died calling for a poor people's campaign, and for garbage workers in Memphis calling for the right to a decent job with a decent wage. We've got to finish that dream, because it is a moral disgrace that there are 14.7 million poor children, and 6 million of them live in extreme poverty in the United States of America today. We must change that together and now. You know how many children that is, the 14.7 million? If you took this incredible room of 30,000 human beings and multiplied it 490 times, you would get a sense of what 14.7 million of our poor little brothers and sisters are living through. It is more than the combined population of 12 United States states and the combined population of countries like Sweden and Costa Rica. It is unworthy of us as a nation. And Dr. King repeatedly told the stories of Dives and Lazarus, and in his last years, saying that Dives didn't go to hell because he was rich. He went to hell because he refused to see and respond to his sick brother Lazarus, who came to his door every day. And it is not about riches, but he worried that the United States would make the same mistake that Dives made, that we are the richest nation on earth. God has blessed us so plentifully, but that we are not seeing the Lazaruses at our gate, and we must not let this country lose its conscience and lose its future. America's poor children did not ask to be born. They didn't choose their parents or their country or their state or their neighborhood or their gender or their color or their race or their faith. In fact, if they had been born in 35 other advanced countries, they would be better off. We are 34 out of 35 and the poorest children in this world. And we're ahead only of Romania, whose economy is 99% smaller than ours. We have no excuse not to do better. And we must mount that campaign to end poverty. Child poverty is not only immoral and unnecessary and preventable, it is too expensive to continue economically. Every year, we let 14.9 million children stay in poverty, 14.7 million children remain in poverty, cost our nation about $500 billion every year in school dropouts, in sickness and incarceration costs, in dependency costs. And we need to wake up to that. It is really dumb investment policy for us to continue to miseducate our children, to have a cradle-to-prison pipeline that we feed our Black and poor and Latino brothers and sisters into. That is feeding a mass incarceration system, often for profit. And it costs us, on average, and our states are spending 2 to 3 times more per prisoner than for public school pupil. That's a really dumb investment policy. And it is not making us safer. And you and I can change it. We can change the things that are destroying so many young people of color and in poverty today. The gun violence, the miseducation, the imprisonment, the poor health care, the hunger and the homelessness. It is not worthy of us as a nation who has been so blessed by God. So we've got to do it because it's not only the right thing to do, it is not only what God demands that we do, but it is the cost-effective thing to do, and it is the only way we're going to be able to really save America's soul and future. So we need to get about doing it. So last year, we asked the nonpartisan Urban Institute to tell us if we invested in 9 policies we knew could make a difference in reducing poverty, how many children could we lift out of poverty right now, and how much would it cost? And they responded to us that we could, if we invested in these things like decent wages and refundable income tax and child tax credits and decent jobs and housing assistance and food assistance programs, that we could reduce overall child poverty by 60%. We could reduce black child poverty by 72%. And we could raise the floor for all of our 14.7 million children and give them a better chance at a decent future. And we therefore publish this shortly, and I hope you'll do some study groups and look at your poverty in your own communities and then begin to make your voices heard about making sure that these kinds of policies prevail and that budget cuts stop, because our Congress is trying to cut the rich safety net that we have already inadequate. And one of the things I hope you'll commit yourself to when you go back home is to say we're not going to have any more cuts in child nutrition programs and food stamp programs, in child care assistance, but you can make that happen. There's enough power in this room to transform our political priorities, and I hope you will do that. We laid out the cost at the Urban Institute, said it would be cost us $77 billion, or 2% of our federal budget to do these things, to change child poverty, lift 60% out, 72% of black children, help 97% of all poor children. But then we also said how we could pay for them. And there are a number of them laid out in our report. But if we just, for example, close tax loopholes that let U.S. corporations avoid $90 billion in federal income taxes each year by shifting their profits to subsidiaries and tax havens, we could do this if we just eliminated special tax breaks for the wealthy by taxing capital gains and dividends at the same rates as we do people who are working for a living. We could eliminate significant amounts of poverty. That would save us $84 billion a year, so we'd have something left over. We need to have a debate about what is just basic fairness in our nation. How can it be just that the richest 1% of Americans own more of the nation's wealth than the bottom 90%? That the highest paid American CEO took home in 2013 more than the combined annual salaries of 6,600 child care workers, and that those who educate and care for our children, who constitute 100% of our future, are so devalued in our society. Teachers are paid nearly 270 times less than a corporate CEO of one of the top 350 firms, with an average compensation package of $15.2 million, compared to an elementary school teacher's average yearly salary, a little over $56,000. And it doesn't matter how intelligent or skilled and hardworking these school teachers may be, they still earn less in a year, about $58,000, than the nearly $164,000 one basketball player earned in one day. 5,500 teachers. Something's wrong with this. And all of our kindergarten teachers in America, and we need a full-day quality 0 through kindergarten program for all of our children to get them ready for school, but all of the kindergarten teachers in America combined earn less in 1 year than 25 hedge fund managers. Something is unjust about that picture, and we must change it. We don't have a money problem, we have a priorities problem. Lee Iacocca, a former chair and CEO of Chrysler, said, "In a completely rational society, the best of us would be teachers, and the rest of us would have to settle for something less. Clearly, our values need adjusting and reversing. And let me just do my pitch, which I did with my own sons. Don't go to law school, go into education and get the next generation ready, because that is where the future of America lies. Now, both houses of Congress didn't think and don't think we're doing enough for our wealthiest Americans and powerful corporations. So the Republican majority voted in April to repeal the estate tax of 5,400 people, the top 0.2%, at a taxpayer cost of $269 billion without a way to pay for it, while leaving in place budget cuts of $36.5 billion in child care assistance to help parents work in Head Start and in other desperate safety net programs that our children desperately need. They also found that they could find enough money to give the Pentagon an extra $138 billion that the Pentagon didn't ask for. And they didn't find a way to pay for it either. They should begin to understand that the real national security of America is its people and its children and its families and its educated populace, and we've got to change those priorities. We do not have a money problem in America. We have a spiritual and moral and power problem in America, and you've got so much power, you can change that. I want to wind down by just sharing a few lessons from Noah's Ark, because I go and say around all the time that the greatest national economic and military security problem does not come from any enemy without. It comes from our failure to take care of our children and our families and to educate them all and to give them decent jobs and hope for a future. And an anonymous sage wrote an old note that came up in my sister sent me, and the first lesson said, in fact, the title of it was Everything You Need to Know in Life You Can Learn from Noah's Ark. And the first lesson was, don't miss the boat. And the United States is going to miss the boat for the future if it continues to let a majority, and these figures always shock me as I say them over and over again, a majority of all of our children be unable to read at grade level in 4th and 8th grade, and almost 75% of our Latino children and 80% of our black children remain unable to read and compute, and they are dropping out of school at rapid rates. Who's going to compete with the Japanese and the Chinese and be at the top in our globalizing competitive economy if we don't educate our children? 74% of our 17 to 34-year-olds can't get in the military because they haven't got the literacy skills or have poor health or have drug or prison records. This is a disaster. The enemy that's going to destroy America is within and in our failure to protect our young. The second lesson from Noah's Ark is that we are all in the same boat. And I keep repeating that God did not make two classes of children, and whether or not we like it or not, non-white children are going to be a majority of our school children in a few years, and they're already a majority of our preschool children. And we need to invest in making them succeed. And we have such an opportunity, becoming a non-white nation, majority nation, to show a non-white majority world that democracy and the United States' views of justice and its dream can really become real. So it's God's giving us a chance to live what we say, and I hope that we will step up to the plate and fulfill that dream of America, which we've not yet done. The third lesson from this anonymous sage was plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. I'm sure everybody thought he was crazy, but tomorrow is today. And I hope you really are going to join with us and others of like minds to invest in every child in the early childhood years, because we know that has more to do with whether they're going to graduate from high school, that we've got to invest in decent jobs so there is hope for these children. I started this Children's Defense Fund out of the Poor People's Campaign when I went out into the public schools after the riots that followed Dr. King's assassination. And I was telling children not to loot and not to riot and not to ruin their futures. And a little boy looked me straight in the eye and said, "Lady, what future? I ain't got no future. I ain't got nothing to lose." And I have spent the last years, decades, trying to prove that boy's truth wrong. In our economically and militarily powerful nation, but spiritually poor nation, it's time to give him hope, and to give hope to all of those young people who are standing there waiting for help. The fourth lesson from this anonymous sage about Noah's Ark was, don't listen to naysayers and critics. If you don't want to be criticized, don't do anything, don't say anything, and don't be anything. Get out there and do what God. Jesus didn't run a popularity contest. He got out and he spoke about the mandate of the gospel to make sure that all had a place in God's kingdom. And so I just hope that we will get out of our boxes and really begin to move towards building that transforming movement we have to create a level playing field for children. The fifth lesson is, remember, and this is my favorite, that the Ark was built by amateurs and the Titanic by experts. We don't need Titanics from politicians. We have to, Dr. King is not going to come back, and we're it. And we've got to get together, the people of God, to get together, the young people to organize. And when I look back at the miracles of the civil rights movement, if we're just a few people who were determined that their children are going to get a better education, who were willing to risk their lives for that, and they transformed this country, all the power in this room. Why can't we even do better? Dr. King didn't start a single movement. Movements bubble up from the bottom. It's young, angry children like me at 19 who just was sick and tired in college of not being able to sit down at a lunch counter and not being able to do anything any other child could do in the South. And we were able to kind of get it done because it was unjust. And I hope that the kinds of gatherings like this is going to build the kind of will for you to go out and say, we're going to create that dream and build that next movement and not wait for some savior. You are the savior, so step up to the plate and make sure you lead. And I want, because we're going through a very difficult period, but at least it's the reality is coming to fore on what is going on race in this country, which has been deeply moving, but it's been something that's been there, and we have got to come to grips with our birth defects of slavery, of Native American genocide, of exclusion of all women from the electoral process, exclusion of all non-properted white men included, but all non-properted men. And if you don't really confront the reality of your birth defects, they keep flaring up, and we need a real truth and reconciliation process in this nation to come to grips with who we have been, because we need to move forward. But we keep having these backlashes, and I hope that this period of deeply disturbing trouble racially will begin to open us up to looking at slavery and to looking at lynching and to looking at those structural inequalities in this society that keeps plaguing us, because we must move forward. I was privileged to know Dr. King from my senior year in college, and I heard him first in compulsory chapel, which I opposed, but I remember more about that, the chapel people and who came through, who were great leaders, than all the classes I had at Spelman College. But he told us in that first time sermon, when he moved up to Atlanta from Montgomery, that we must always move forward. And he says, if you cannot fly, you drive. If you can't drive, you run. If you can't run, you walk. And if you can't walk, you crawl. But you always move forward. And this country has got to move forward. not backwards. And the other thing he said in that same sermon was to step out in faith and take the first step and leave the stairway to God. And for those of us who say we are people of faith and that we're trying to do God's will, he's never let me down yet. Didn't ever know how I was going to make a living. Didn't ever know how I was going to pay off my student loans. Didn't ever know how I was going to live in Mississippi. But I'll tell you, God will make a way if you are doing God's work. So get out there and step out in faith and build this movement. And I really want to have us struggle to live our faith and to help America remember, and for each of us to remember, that the fellowship and sistership of human beings is more important than the fellowship of race and class and gender and any kinds of perceived differences. I hope you will be decent and fair and insist that others do so in your presence and be so in your presence. Don't tell, don't laugh at or tolerate racial, ethnic, religious, or gender jokes or any practices intended to demean rather than enhance another human being. Walk away from them. Stare them down. Make them unacceptable in your presence through daily acts of moral consciousness. Let's all counter the proliferating voices of racial and ethnic and religious division, which is gaining respectability again over our land. And let's make sure we come to grips with our growing problems and turn those into opportunity so that we can move ahead. Now, as you leave this wonderful gathering, I hope you'll go back home and that you'll provoke discussions in your communities about child poverty in your community. It's been a wonderful thing you've done this week. And I hope you'll go back and we'll deal with the hunger and the homelessness, but I hope we'll deal with the root causes, and I hope you will take child watches out into poor neighborhoods and see how our fellow Americans and sisters and brothers are living. And really take your powerful people out, because you really have to make them see the hunger. We didn't get any traction in Mississippi for a long time until Dr. King and then Robert Kennedy came and knocked on doors on poor shacks, because nobody believed there was anybody in America without any income and that they could not find some food somewhere. But you have to put a face, a child's face, a human face, and we don't know each other in our community, so let's talk about how we can go back and do study groups, and let's talk about how we can do child watches, and CDF can help you learn how to do that and provide you with a lot of the materials. Secondly, a number of you already do observe Children's Sabbath, third weekend in October, but I hope you will really begin to broaden that. And this year, the title is Ending Child Poverty Now in America. So I hope that if you've not already planned one, that you will begin to think about whether you can do that, but do it next year if you can't do it this year. Third, you have 13 freedom schools in your denomination, and I'm very grateful to you for that. And we have 5 of them here in Detroit, but I would like to see hundreds of freedom schools everywhere so children are off the streets. The churches need to step up and compete with the gang dealers and the drug dealers and give children positive adults to interact with, to learn how to be excited about reading, to have role models that they can emulate. And I cannot tell you, they don't make quite as much noise, but we just finished our Freedom School training, national training, for about a little over 2,000 young people, college-age students, and they are so incredibly engaged, and the energy was so incredibly important. And they are going back and they are really trying to transform education by showing them that children will live up or down to your expectation. And who says that learning can't be fun? And if you give them books that reflect their lives, they get excited about it. And I am very pleased that a third of the young people running Freedom Schools now are Black and Latino males. It's sure hard to be what you can't see. And so all of us need to get in there and go and make sure that these church doors are open. And I know that you have some in your churches here, in your denomination. I just hope we can get many more. And they work everywhere. They work in homeless shelters. They are working in secure detention facilities. Children need hope and caring adults, and they're desperate to get a decent education and have a sense that they can get a job in the future. I also hope that you will vote. You all didn't vote enough, and you haven't registered enough in the recent. Get out there and vote, because if you don't vote, you're letting other people set the priorities for your nation and your communities. Don't do that.